Hi, Eric. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hey, Grace.
To start the show, so this episode, we'll start with a quick ad read. So this episode is brought to you by LG Nova. Get ready to ignite your passion for innovation at the fourth Annual InnoFest, happening at the iconic Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco on September 25th and 26th. This two-day event brought to you by LG Nova is your chance to dive into the future with industry leaders and cutting-edge startups shaping health tech, AI, clean tech, life science, smart life, mobility, and more. And here's something extra special. I'll be hosting a panel at InnoFest, guiding a dynamic discussion on the future of AI and the workforce. Join me along with other thought leaders as we explore the trends and the technologies driving innovation and positive change. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity to be part of the conversation and help create a brighter, more innovative tomorrow. Register today and be part of the movement at InnoFest 2024. Okay, so we can start our show. And by the way, if anyone wants to register, here will be a link in the comments below. Okay, so let's start with your so the official show just started. So let's start with your journey. So like you have worked at like Google and Amazon before like starting your venture career. Why don't we start with like, what were some, also you have built a company with your like in-law back in school. So like why don't we start with your entrepreneurial journey before entrepreneurial and tech journey before we dive into like the current investing work.
Yeah, so I was pretty set on entrepreneurship coming out of both college, and then I took a job after school at GE where I was in operations, factory floor, manufacturing, and that even got me more excited about software. I was like, I gotta get out of this manufacturing gig, and so I did sign up for an MBA program and thought I would use that to incubate a company. I in fact I did a little contest, won like a business plan contest, had a little bit of money and some legal help there, and built an app out of an Android app that I actually showed. It was like working enough that I showed it to my Amazon interviewer for my PM job that I got for the summer. So yeah, the app didn't actually go anywhere. I never fully launched it, but it did get me the job at Amazon. So it served a purpose.
I wonder, so like what are some, so like currently, since you are investing in like early stage mostly and then like in the business software space, and I wonder, I know that like I wonder like what are some like like what would be like the one question you would ask entrepreneurs to like that's kind of like a stable question to like maybe like understand like their motivation as well as like in general, like how do you kind of like what would be like one question that you would ask like every entrepreneur to like understand if there's like if the company have longevity or like if the team have like what it takes to like succeed.
I mean, it may be as simple as like, why did you start the company? I don't have a great one-liner, but one of the things I like to understand about a founder is, especially in infrastructure investing that I do, these tend to be experts in their field and they've done this a long time. And so it's important to me that this is in some ways their life's work. I'm not as excited about founders who have kind of recently pivoted into this, discovered a new idea. And this is kind of a thing they've done for the last 18 months. Generally, it's something they've been working on for a decade. Maybe not the startup, but this technology, this approach is something that is like I said, their life's work. That's my goal, to figure it out. And so, yeah, it may just be as simple as asking them why they started the company, and hopefully that's a really long answer.
I wonder, so like since like I feel like a lot of the since like you are focusing on like the cloud infrastructure as well as like a lot of like software developer tools, what would be like the differences between like when you're like looking at like a founder that's like coming from an industry background versus like someone coming from like, they're just out of school. I know that you guys invest in like Box early on, and I wonder like how do you evaluate like if someone maybe with not like much industry experience versus like someone coming from the industry but like they are like maybe working on their first startup, like what would be the different benchmark that you are like using to evaluate these type of like founders to think if there's like a path to like figure out like if they're better than their like competitive companies?
Yeah. So I think industry experience is really valuable in helping you understand the market for an idea and building a network to help you execute on an idea. I think being a founder is its own career challenge, and very little can prepare you for that experience. And so finding somebody out of school isn't necessarily worse than finding a really experienced person for can they lead the company. Like I said, I think work experience can give you a network that you can draw resources from. It can give you a great understanding of market needs. But if they have the market need figured out, they have a great understanding of that, they have a network from other means, then the question really is, regardless of industry experience, can they lead the company? And that's a harder thing to tease out, and it helps to have multiple touch points with the founder where you can kind of see them learning and responding. And I think one thing you can do, even in, if you haven't met them before, but this is like a first interaction, a fundraise, is to provide some critical feedback to the founder and see how they respond. And I think the best founders are able to internalize that feedback, maybe even critically respond in reverse, say, I agree with this, but not so much with this. And I think that critical feedback response is what you're going to find in the board meeting. It's what you're going to find for the next decade with this company. And the best founders respond quite well to it.
Totally. I feel like I really like what you said about like maybe like giving them some like negative feedback so to see how people react. I feel like taking like any type of like feedback takes a lot of like I feel like it just like kind of quickly evaluate if people have the growth mindset. And I wonder for like since so I want to dive a little bit into the topics of like the like current company that you have invested. Like so this morning you guys just invested in Cortex. Why don't we start there since it's a Series C company? From my understanding, you guys primarily focus on like Series A and B. Like, what do you see in this company? And maybe like for the audience who may not be familiar with it, if you could like give us like a little bit of like TLDR on the company.
Yeah, this morning, Bloomberg announced that my firm, Scale Venture Partners, led the Series C investment in Cortex, cortex.io, it's the URL. And they are an internal developer platform, which is an emerging category that's kind of the system of record for engineers. Specifically, it gives you a service catalog, so you can see all the different services in the company and who is assigned as the service owner, which is kind of the first accountability we give engineers. Without this, it's unclear who owns code, who's responsible for what. You can write code, you can edit code, but who actually like is in charge of it in the end? And that responsible party is the service owner. And Cortex is kind of the system of record for that ownership. But it also provides a self-service capability for deploying services and other kind of deployment tasks. So the platform engineering team can expose common tasks to the developers via self-service portal. And they're adding more and more to the IDP all the time. So yeah, you're right. We normally do A's and B's, and in general, we're not super focused on the name of the letter, but really we want to get in as early as possible to a company that has proven a big market. And that's often at the A or B stage. It's when you definitely know there's a category here. They found product market fit, and then we want to invest as early as possible. In this case, we just missed the last round, and but at this round, the category internal developer portal looks like as big as any category we've seen. And so even the Series C, I think, is a great opportunity for us to get in relatively early for what feels like a big opportunity.
I wonder when it comes to like evaluating or like finding infrastructure related companies. Like, so I know that like I feel like with um for example, like I feel like Series A and B or Series C have like a lot more data that you could lean towards. What would be like some data or like objectives that you would lean towards to? Is there like a set of like X amount of ARR, or like is there what would be like the right benchmark that you feel like people should use to evaluate um, these like more towards like SaaS companies?
Yeah, the goal is to figure out if there's a repeatable sales motion. So
Mhm,
the ARR that they have, whether it's 1 million, 5 million, or 500K, is only indicative if that amount of ARR has demonstrated repeatability.
mhm,
So if these are friends and family, I mentioned people who have strong networks, they can go close a 500,000
mhm,
in ARR from their friends, and that's not very repeatable.
mhm,
Also, if the logos are very different and the use cases are very different, this also feels like something that would be hard to hire a half dozen sales reps who can, in 3 months, repeat that kind of motion. And so what I get excited about is when it's clear that a similar type of company is buying more or less the same thing for the same reasons. That's something you can hire a rep and explain them to do in 3 months, and they can go build pipeline and close. And then even better is if that thing has a big market size. So if it's in the case of Cortex, we found people in oil and gas, people in software, people in lots of different industries, quick serve restaurants. They were all buying effectively the same thing for the same reasons at a fairly high, spend.
mhm.
So all this tells me that this is applicable to a lot of companies. And so the market's really big, and we can go hire a bunch of reps to more or less sell the same thing, the same problem to a lot of these companies. So it felt like, very repeatable.
I wonder, so for like them to sell to like as you mentioned, like restaurants or like um oil and gas services, like what does the sales motion look like, since like they're very different than like I know that on their like company website there's like Adobe, there's like a bunch of tech companies.
Yep.
I wonder like who are they, so like how does the sales journey kind of look like for Cortex to sell it to these like different type of companies?
Yeah. So fortunately, they're always selling to the same type of buyer in terms of persona. So it's always the CTO, the VP of engineering.
Mhm,
It's the highest person in the technical organization. And so regardless of how they enter the organization, eventually they're selling to more or less the same person who has similar incentives and behaves more or less the same way, regardless as if they're in a fast food restaurant company or if they're in um, the Adobe, the company you mentioned. And those people are all in this case they're leading software engineers, and they're all worried about the agility and the uh, productivity of those software engineering teams. And Cortex can sell on those concerns and value proposition, irregardless of industry.
I wonder, so like for them to sell to like the CTO, like how does like the journey kind of look like? Since like right now I hear there's a lot of like bottoms up sales motion. Like if there's like a bunch of engineers decided to use a product and like they may push it to the leadership. But like I wonder like how does like a Cortex typically sell to the CTO? Is this like a maybe like each seat there's like X amount of dollar, and then like the CTO would be like, okay, we'll that our entire team will be like using X for X amount of time, or like
Mm-hmm.
how is it kind of like I guess like what would be the challenges to like push it forward? Because I feel like also like for engineering efficiency, like so basically like how much efficiency like a particular product would help improve, like how do you kind of like measure something like that? So I'm sure like I definitely heard of like tools that are kind of like helping to measure that, but like I wonder like how does it kind of like quickly um like demonstrate it to the C level to like make a decision to like buy a certain software?
Yep. So think of 3 levels in the organization. There's the individual developer, there's a platform engineering team, which is a smaller team charged with some of these responsibilities. And then there's the executive level, the VPs of engineering, the CTO. They could land with any 3 of these, but what the company has discovered, and this is why I mentioned repeatability, landing with the developers works, but is not ideal. Landing with the platform engineering team is similar, but landing with the VP of engineering and the CTO is 10 times better, because in this case, they are selling not only, as I mentioned, like agility and productivity, but they're really selling change management. So today, if you want to cause change in the organization for a developer, it's really hard. You kind of have to, like, if you wanted to, you know, uh, change the way everybody deploys their software, you have to go service to service to talk to each of the owners and kind of convince them and discuss a process by which they will eventually do this thing, a security review, whatever it is you want to change. And but if you the way we sell, the company sells to the CTO, or is they first land with the developer or the platform engineering team, and then ask them, what is it that your VP of engineering or CTO really wants to change in the organization? And they may say, oh, well, our mean time to resolution, like our incidents are just not being resolved fast enough. And so we have this measurement in the organization, and right now it's like 2 weeks. And we really want to get that below like 3 days. That's this goal of the VP of engineering. And then we help them position Cortex to solve that particular need. And we say, Cortex is the service catalog that you need as a platform engineer, but also it addresses this problem that your VP of engineering has. And they're going to help you with budget and give you air cover. So then they take it to their VP under the guise of this problem. And then the VP gets all excited and helps, deploy this across the organization. And so that part is kind of unique. It's not so repeatable, as I mentioned earlier, but we've made it part of our repeatable process. Find out what that metric is that the current executives are pushing and figure out how to position Cortex to address that metric and then take it up in the organization.
Totally. How long does the sales journey typically look like? And how do you figure out like how much budget does a CTO have?
Yeah. So because the budget is really just a, how important is this to me kind of thing? Because they have quite a bit of budget, right? So I think
Well, I have
part
another.
of it.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry
go ahead.
about this. Like, so, since like you like since like we just talked about like they're selling to oil and gas services, and then they're selling to like the Adobe of the world. I feel like the technical budget's probably like very different. If I were like the sales team, I would go after the Adobe of the world, but like I wonder if that's like the truth, or like maybe like a traditional tech company or a traditional company of like the Fortune 500 or something maybe have like a lot more budget. But like, I mean, I'm just out of curiosity on like how do you think about like which type of company to go after? And I would assume like Adobe or like some tech company, they have like a more sophisticated engineering team. So they may be although they have more budget, but or like more willingness to invest in like a new tool, like how do you kind of like evaluate? But like they probably have like way more resources because they have their own engineering stuff. Maybe they could build something to solve their problem. So like how do you think about like which type of like clients to go after?
Yeah, I think your last point is maybe the most helpful here, is that some companies have a culture of do it yourself, and some companies have a culture of buying the best products available. And actually, so some of the tech companies are the ones we hear about that want to do it themselves. They feel like they have access to talent. But other companies in other industries outside of tech find it harder, I think, to hire folks out of Google and Facebook, and who bring with them the patterns that engineering teams are looking to build around. And so they end up the creators for Cortex come out of Uber and other companies that have those patterns. They've codified them into Cortex, and then you can buy them off the shelf rather than have to, hire that talent. So I think folks outside of tech actually really like that they can procure the kind of tech patterns that might be hard for them to hire for, which I think increases the budget, because now you're kind of getting into the headcount and salary type budget, which is most of R&D, right?
I wonder, so I know that you're a board observer, you were a board observer of like Honeycomb. So I saw like a lot of like AI startups are like kind of like creating similar-ish like products.
Yep.
I wonder in the space, I know that they're still like the industry leader, but like I wonder for like a company like this to succeed, how do you quickly evaluate like, do we have like the right team and like to like execute off this kind of idea? I know that you invest in like Series A and B, like maybe it's earlier than a lot of like our listener who are like maybe early R stage investors. But like from the lens of like Series A and B, how do you quickly like how would you suggest people to use like as a benchmark to like evaluate early on for a company like this? Maybe we start with like, what the product is and then like go from the thinking framework of like investing in a company like Honeycomb.
Yeah, so Honeycomb is an observability company. They kind of coined the phrase observability, which encompasses what we used to call monitoring, logging. And so you can think of Datadog and Splunk and New Relic. And you're right that Datadog, Splunk, and New Relic are all, like any public company today is announcing AI products, including the three I mentioned. And so there seems to be a market emerging around like AI observability. Maybe that's what you're referring to, Grace. There's a ton of new startups offering something like this. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how would you evaluate something like that? And maybe kind of what you're asking is, how did we evaluate Honeycomb? Is that a little bit of the question?
Yeah, correct. Sorry. I
Yeah.
feel like
No, it's great. So
my questions.
as part of my job is to make sure I'm saying the right thing. So when I told you at the beginning of the show that I get really excited when I meet people who are experts in their field and this is their life's work. And that's what we found with Honeycomb. Christine and Charity had done this work when they were their own startup, Parse, which got acquired by Facebook. And then they built the internal observability tools within Facebook. So they clearly knew how to do this and had strong opinions. And I also mentioned that with work experience, you build a network. And that's exactly what Christine and Charity brought. They had a whole following of people that trusted them as thought leaders, if for lack of a better word, on these sorts of things. So we were excited to back them as soon as we saw that they had figured out repeatability in the go-to-market motion. And that's it's been promising. So, how do we assess these AI startups? I think it would be a similar pattern, right? I'd want to find somebody who had been working in observability a long time, who had figured out how AI might impact observability. That this is more or less their life's work. And then two, had worked with enough customers to iterate on that initial vision to build something that they could sell repeatedly. And that's what those are the two things I would be looking for. We're pretty. I think Honeycomb's going to have a good shot at doing that themselves. So that's not something I'm currently looking for myself. But yeah,
I wonder when you're thinking about like if since like they're coming from industry, like so they're a second-time founder, which is like a plus, and they are coming from like a big tech company, and they are like the industry leaders. But like I feel like when it comes to like some of the companies, maybe for example like a box like Aaron Levy is like coming out of school from it. Like, and I wonder how do you evaluate which type of technology companies would be execute better with like people with no experience, but like maybe they're just like AI PhDs versus like people coming from the industry. with a lot of experience? I guess like which field within like the infrastructure dive tool domain, like you feel like have a better shot with like people with the experience versus no experience?
Yeah, so I do think that there are some markets that that like emerge quite quickly. Usually there's a platform shift accompanying them. So in the case of Box, that was cloud. So Aaron was taking files that were on our desktops and putting them in the cloud. Excuse me. So SaaS and cloud was a new thing, and so it's hard to find anyone with a lifetime of experience around SaaS and cloud. And I think actually AI is in the same boat at the moment. This is a new platform shift, and so I think I think young founders are going to have just as much domain experience as experienced founders, and so it's a level playing field for them. If I was an Aaron Levy out of college today, I'd probably be hacking on AI, and that would be something that would be appealing, I think, to an investor.
Speaking of like hacking into AI today, like what would be something like if you're like in college or something, like what would be like a specific problem that you will be solving?
If I was in college hacking on AI like an Aaron Levy, what problem would I be solving?
Yes.
Yeah, we've all heard the story of the Dropbox founder who was trying to like do this on a bus, right? They were trying to move some files around. I think personal and the folks at YC tell you to chase personal pain points. I think there's there's probably hundreds you could solve today. I mean, personal pain points I have are one, like I think healthcare tech feels like it never quite went to the cloud, and the consumer healthcare experience is terrible. I think there's all kinds of things that could be done around billing and that could be addressed with AI. In the developer tool front, there's this emerging kind of category around agents where we take every kind of junior employee, and generally junior employees have fairly narrowly scoped responsibilities. These are QA engineers, these are SDRs in a sales organization. And so I think they're more amenable to AI, and there's I think I'd be building agents that would address those needs that could augment a quality engineering team or a sales development rep team, kind of an agent for kind of entry level workers.
I wonder when you are thinking about like, so since you mentioned about QA, you invest in a company called QA Wealth. Would you want to share with the audience a little bit more of like, how did you find the company, and then what were some thinking behind like how you decided to like make an investment into them?
Yeah. It was along those lines. We were looking for something in the software development space. So Copilot was like this quickly growing to 100 million, maybe $1 billion in revenue company or product line. So clearly AI has a role to play in software engineering. And so it was a deep dive in that. And there was a lot of people betting on replacing software engineers themselves. And that seemed like the last thing AI was going to do. Like the first thing was going to replace these, like I said, more entry-level junior roles. And so we looked within the organization at the entry-level junior roles, and quality and testing was one of them. So we looked at the market for AI testing and quality. And it was all brand new AI companies, really, except for QA Wolf. The company had reached double-digit ARR, was growing quickly. They didn't have as much focus around AI, but as we met with the company, I learned that they had spent the last 4 years deeply understanding quality engineering, why it hadn't worked before. Because there's been a lot of attempts, but not great successes in QA.
Oh, why is that?
Yeah, I think a couple reasons. One, this is something people don't want to spend a lot of money on, and that they always think they can do better in-house.
Mhm.
And the pitfall that happens in-house is you hire a QA engineer and you think they're going to produce 5 tests the first month or something.
Mhm.
And so in your head, you think, okay, I'm going to get 5 tests a month out of this person. But what you don't realize is that their job is not to write tests. Their job is to maintain tests.
Mhm.
And after they get about 25, I don't know, maybe more tests written, the backlog of maintenance fills up their time. So then they're unable to write new tests. In fact, they become just like a fully consumed cog in the QA process.
Mhm.
And that frustrates the team because they're like, oh, we hired this person, and then they kind of slow down. And so then they hire another person, but they're not able to reach velocity in test writing because they haven't built the efficiency of test maintenance. Basically, there's just a misalignment. They think they want test writers, but really they need test maintainers.
Mhm.
And so what we noticed was QA Wolf had kind of figured this out, that like they knew how to kind of streamline and even automate test maintenance. And so then the problem just became, how do you do test writing, which AI does really well. And so we invested in the company as they were early in their AI journey, knowing that they understand the problem deeper than any of these new AI startups.
How do you like see them before the Copilot trend is like fully like merged into like the current ecosystem? Like, what would be like the equivalent of Copilot related companies to like today's equivalent? Because I feel like there's so many, like everything's Copilot these days. And then you mentioned like this is QA, but like I'm sure in the space there's like 1,000 companies there. How do you like spot a company like a lot early on than like a current like when they're like more popular?
Yeah, so it's tough. I mean, we look at the same, um, so signals that like our portfolio is always buying new products. And so
Mhm.
I think I try to develop relationships with people who like to find early products as buyers. In the case of QA Wolf, they had some great early customers, Drata, SalesLoft. These were really
Mhm.
sophisticated tech companies that were choosing QA Wolf over
Mhm.
doing things in-house or other solutions. So I think, yeah, it's kind of chasing where those early adopters are looking. And so today there's going to be there's a dozen really progressive CTOs that are trying to find the next AI kind of automation tool for their startup. And so I'm trying to find them, and then they're going to point me to the startups.
How do you find them? I'm sure you have like a
Uh,
relationship, but if you're starting today, like what would be the best way to find them? Is that like gonna be like, I don't know, like you mentioned like Drata or like some other company, they're more like later stage. Um, and how do you kind of like build a relationship if you're like starting your career today?
I think it's just be really resourceful with people. I think there's a misunderstanding that business networking is about like having lunch with people and asking them for favors. And I think it's actually mostly about being really helpful to people and um, synthesizing conversations. So if I go talk to the CTO at Drata or SalesLoft, and I'm able to help he or she in this journey of identifying startups, I can, hey, here's 4 others I know about. Would you like an introduction to them? And then also come back to him or her later and say, I talked to 5 other CTOs, and this is what they are looking for and found. I'm synthesizing and kind of aggregating information for these people, and I think they see that as like a really valuable resource. So I'm giving much more than I take, and occasionally people feel like, hey, they should return the favor,
Um,
and yeah.
how do you like first understand like what they need? Is that like by just directly asking, hey, like what do you need help with right now? Or like how do you kind of like navigate the conversation with people who are because I feel like when you're grabbing lunch with someone, like maybe um like you won't be able to like get to a certain level of like sophistication to like get people to say, hey, like we need this tool for this problem, or like how do you kind of like walk the conversation to actually understand like what they need help with, and then like maybe since like you mentioned like you would like introduce them to maybe potential company that can solve their problems, like how do you kind of like um actually understand like what people may need help with?
Yeah. I'm going to give you a longer question and more broader than you're asking. And because I think there's a meme out there that, how do people come up with ideas for products?
Mhm.
You can go ask customers and they'll tell you, what they need. And it's a very useful, but also kind of inefficient way. I think most great ideas start at least with a kernel of an idea from an individual saying, I feel like I understand. I think this is important. Like this is important to me, but also I think everyone else would value this if it existed. And so I'm going to go build it. And then I'm going to talk to customers to kind of refine my thinking and adjust it. But to bootstrap the idea purely from crowdsourced, I think is it's just inefficient.
Mhm.
And I think the same is true when you're trying to understand the needs of a buyer or someone in your network. You kind of have to have an opinion about what people think is important and start from there. And so, yeah, I imagine you could project what most CTOs are worried about today. They're worried about budget. They're worried about talent. AI is a big idea. So I
Mhm.
think you could project that most CTOs are trying to figure out AI tooling in their company.
Mhm.
And so I think you can lead the conversation with, and even producing some content around that might bring people into you as opposed to just purely going outbound. But you're right. Eventually, you solicit from them kind of the more specifics. Like I have not only a problem with AI and development team, but specifically onboarding new engineers is like really painful for us, and that's like an additional insight you wouldn't maybe have initially, and that comes from that dialogue.
You have a series called Contributor, and not contributor, but basically you also have your own like podcast. And what are some like core lessons that you've learned from your own like content creation?
Yeah. So yes, I do this every other week podcast around open source projects. It started because venture the relationships can kind of seem very transactional and commercial,
Mhm.
and I say no to more people than I say yes, and I wanted to have another level of relationship with them, and so I can tell everybody in my kind of all the founders I talk to, let's do a podcast episode, and that was just fun for me. Most people like talking about the open source more publicly than they do the company.
Mhm.
So, and what have I learned? So, a lot of them never intended to start a company. They first wanted to solve a problem, or they were just excited, like they had an itch basically they wanted to scratch.
Mhm.
And it's surprising how these things emerge from small things. One, I remember, I think it's OpenBB. This was a guy who was trying to trade meme stocks and didn't have the right tools to like understand what was going on in the pricing. And he posted this project called like it had a catchy name related to the meme stocks, and people got excited about it. It blew up on Hacker News, and then suddenly he was like onto something,
Mhm.
and he just worked overtime for the next couple months to build it into something real.
Mhm.
And I think that's a lot of the in addition to like a lifetime of work,
Mhm.
there are these moments that are kind of serendipitous
Mhm.
that people just chase. I think like you work hard every now and then you get lucky, and then when you get lucky, you double down, and that's been some of the experience I've noticed, the patterns from the
Totally.
interviews.
How like I guess like how do you select like which person to be on your show, and like how do you like typically like research the level of like conversation to have with these people? I know it's like more focused on like open source. Um and like do you just interview like maybe like the popular project of the week, or like how do you kind of like do your own version of like selection?
Yeah, it's a bit more selfish than that, because I'm not trying to represent the economy or or it's more like for example, I was really interested in SQLite and kind of edge databases a few months back. And so I met with basically all 6 of the biggest open source projects in SQLite back to back. It was kind of like research development for me, or kind of, researching, but also a nice way to, like I said, give back to the people. So I could email the third person and be like, look, I've already met with these other 2 people. Here's what they said about your project. Here's how I understand it. Does this make sense? Should we clarify this on a podcast? And they're like, totally. And I think it means a lot to them that I kind of understand where they're coming from. And then I think the community appreciates kind of a deep dive on a topic. So it's been a bit more, spurts and surges around different topics of interest to me at the moment.
Why open source?
Mostly just, I think 4 years ago, when I was kind of initially focused on open source, I don't think the venture ecosystem appreciated it much. This was before Databricks got big, before Confluent was big. And that I felt like that was the new way big companies were going to be formed. I think that's well understood now. But the other reason is just that more people talk more publicly about open source than they do their company. So we can go into great detail about, the numbers and growth, and which some are hesitant to share publicly about the company.
I wonder, so how technical would it need to be to converse with a lot of open source engineering leaders?
Maybe 20% of the conversation is technical. A lot of it's around the narrative, and then we talk a lot about growth. Like how do you find your initial customers? How do you choose between commercial and open source? Yeah, and none of that. All of that's quite general and appealing. But there is probably a segment where I go as deep as I can, which isn't terribly deep, but we spend 20 minutes kind of geeking out on how it works. And that's important. It's helpful for me. As I said, a lot of this is selfish to understand how it really works. But there's only so deep I can go. So it ends up being a minor part of the show.
I wonder, so I want to learn more from since you are chatting with a lot of these founders, what are some general trends that you're seeing in the open source space that you feel like actually will be a big company coming from it, basically?
Yeah, I think we're seeing. I mentioned the edge database SQLite. I do think we're kind of seeing a lot of open source database companies at the moment. There were a ton of vector AI focused ones, and now we're seeing those more as broader search, which I think is maybe the right shape, as well as just your traditional, MongoDB is still maybe the most popular kind of app database, and it was pre-cloud. I mean, MongoDB's and a lot's changed since then. So that's a trend I spent some time on. Certainly, this idea of AI agents that I alluded to earlier, I think there's a whole kind of ecosystem of app development. Like if you're instead developing not an app but an agent, this kind of indeterministic, has a lot of micro agents under the hood kind of thing, that feels like a very different way of developing. And there's a bunch of open source around that I think needs to be built, because generally when we do app development, we're mostly interacting with open source projects. These are our database and our tooling, and that's created big companies historically.
I wonder why there's major amount of open source popping up lately, and how does AI have kind of influence in the space?
So I think open source is a tried true way of building an audience. It's as much marketing spend as it is engineering spend. So maybe that's why we're seeing some of the open source getting attention in this world is kind of hard, right? You need to, and outside of spending marketing dollars, I think open source is as good an avenue as any. On the AI front, I think we're in the middle of like a really intriguing point in history. Are these models going to be models are going to be the foundation of software in some form going forward? And are these models going to be proprietary from OpenAI or others, or are they going to be open source? This happened in operating systems, right? There was a time when Windows ruled the world, and Linux and Unix were kind of new things that nobody knew about. They didn't take over consumer desktop, but every server, I don't know, 90% of servers running today are running on Linux. Open source certainly won that kind of arena. And that's a very valuable place to be, right? The operating system. So I think we're kind of figuring that out for AI at the moment. Is 90% of the foundation models going to be open source in the future, or are they going to be proprietary? And so I think there's a lot of enthusiasm in AI to build the kind of the open source tool chain, the Linux of the future.
I wonder, okay, so I want to go back to like, so you mentioned about like, I feel like getting attention is like really important for like software companies. And like, how do people like turn them into clients? Because um, I feel like the challenge of like, I feel like it sounds like open source projects are kind of like a freemium, the free part of the freemium ecosystem.
Yeah. Yep.
But like how likely would people be able to like turn like an open source project into something like people will pay later on?
So there are certain domains in which it's very likely, and others in which founders need to be very disciplined and creative in order to ensure they will be. In the world of like databases, for example, everyone's willing to pay for their database. It's kind of a especially server-side things. So I think client-side databases and client-side libraries have historically been harder to monetize, and there's just an expectation that you don't need to pay for them, in part because you can't gate distribution very well. But on server-side, and most databases are server-side, you can gate distribution, you can gate access to a cloud server, and so you can monetize. So in those domains, I don't worry about it too much. But in others, which I think is, most open source startups, they're kind of innovating on the model. They're giving away their product for free at the beginning. And it's really important to me that the founder understands that these early adopters are not future customers necessarily. Because I think what attracts people, to open source is sometimes different than what attracts them to a product. So a couple ideas for you. If your open source project is attracting a really broad, wide audience, like everything in the JavaScript, kind of ecosystem tends to be, I think, harder to monetize. If that JavaScript audience, it's a big one. Like if you want a bunch of GitHub stars, that's the path to do it. On the other hand, if you like Spark, the kind of ETL and data processing tool, and Kafka, a related tool, I think these had smaller ecosystems than like the JavaScript community, just because they're back-end engineers, they're data processing engineers. It's kind of a more nuanced group. But attracting them, they were much easier to monetize, again, because they had a path towards a more server-side implementation. So I think it's helpful for a founder to appreciate that, to say, I'm going to get a bunch of attention with these people. I probably won't sell much to them, and I need to find a community that I can sell to, kind of use this attention to accomplish a commercial end. And I've seen some very successfully do that. I think they tease out the enterprise from the kind of prosumer people. They tease out the large organizations, and then they build products they can monetize within those groups.
So how do people actually tease out like the people will pay or not? Like, do they do at the very beginning, or like let's call it like after a month of using this, or like after you use X amount of um time or something that like people you need to pay or like how do
Mhm.
you like quickly I guess like turn the like paid subscription on? And well, like how like if they're doing it too early, like I'm sure like people maybe like switch to like a competitive project. Like how do you kind of like what are some like success story that you've seen that people are doing it well to convert at like what stage?
Yeah. So what a portfolio company of ours, Permit, has an open source project called Opal, and they offer authorization and access control primitives to software engineers. So if you want to build access control into your application, you can install something like Permit. And they get a ton of people showing up to their open source project, to their Slack community, asking questions, and they spend a lot of resources engaging with that community. It's quite valuable. And then as they engage, they find some people come from large companies. In fact, access control is kind of a unique field where that caters more towards large enterprise, large applications. If you're building a small app, you can just have an admin role and a user role, and you're kind of done. If you're building like, like if you're like a multinational, or you're building like vehicles, imagine an electric vehicle, like it's actual physical access control. Like you need to be able to like, can the dealer unlock the car? Can multiple owners unlock the car? Can who can access what APIs on the vehicle? And if the vehicle sold, how do you transfer ownership of the car?
Mhm.
These are all kind of really complicated access control scenarios that Permit does very well. So they get a lot of attention from the community for these simple use cases, and they just give them away for free. Like if you just need an admin and user role-based access, you can have it. But if you're a large enterprise, you're like an automaker, you're a healthcare system, eventually you're going to need these other features, right? So I think feature segmentation is one, scale segmentation is another. And then the third would be you just really want to pay, you want someone on the hook to like ensure the success of the product and support you. And the third would just be kind of enterprise assurances. Those three things, I think, are ways that you price discriminate enterprises.
Mm.
And it serves everybody well. So these kind of low need people get a free product. These high need people get a really great enterprise product, and you use one to kind of provide marketing to the other.
I wonder, so like, how do you like when you're selecting each products to back, like which one, since you mentioned about like repeatability of sales is like very important. How big of like the profit margin kind of should be, or like what does a unit economics should look like when you are like feeling comfortable to like invest money in? Because I feel like a lot of the software company could be really costly to like build, and like I wonder if there's like a particular objective that you would look for to um like when it comes to like making an investment into a company. Maybe we could use like Permit as an example, or like any of your portfolio company.
Yeah. So there's kind of two levels to this. I mean, unit economics can mean a lot of things, but in general, you're looking at the cost to serve a customer,
Mhm.
and usually in software, it's pretty high. So it's often 90% margins, but I think anything over 70 is worthwhile. And in my case, I don't worry too much about that at the early stages because that can fluctuate when you're small, as long as the model appears to be, um, you know, normal at scale. The unit other side of unit economics is acquisition. How much does it cost to acquire a customer, or acquire $1 of revenue? And the ideal benchmark is something closer to like every dollar you spend on sales and marketing can get you a dollar of annualized revenue. That's like really good and maybe ideal. Um, we've seen customers, Permit's one that they have really strong because they use this open source channel. Their sales and marketing costs are low, but their R&D expenses are higher. They're doing a lot of product building, open source building, engagement with the community. But on the whole, it is more of a dollar per dollar. So that's great. And that would be kind of the benchmark I look at for investments, is like, how much are you spending to acquire customers, how much annualized revenue you're getting. And I think the closer you get to direct sales, you're looking at more like a 70 cents on the dollar. It's kind of a less efficient, but more proven and scalable channel.
Got it. Can you elaborate more of like direct sales? You mentioned like this is like a more costly.
Yeah. So this open source model, right? You do this. People just show up, right, in your Slack channel or in your project, and then you can engage with them. Maybe you have some salespeople that just engage over Slack and close a deal. That's going to be, those salespeople can handle more ARR. They can close more ARR per person, and so the sales and marketing is going to look efficient. But say you wanted to double the sales team. I mean, having twice as many people responding to Slack is not gonna. There's only so many people in Slack, right? So somehow you have to double the number of people in Slack, and it's unclear in this organic kind of open sourcey approach how you double the number of people in Slack. Do you write twice as much code into open source, and is that going to do it? Whereas if you instead have a direct sales, which is like you hire reps who go outbound, they send emails on LinkedIn and they generate their own leads and then sell them the product. If they can do that, then you can scale go to market as much as you want, right? There's just more people you can message on LinkedIn, as long as you know exactly who your ICP is and you have a strong sales motion. But the point I was making is that while Slack might be cheap, these direct sales people are expensive, and it's usually pretty fixed. Like, you're gonna have to pay them X amount of money to engage on LinkedIn and bring in the leads and then close them. So it's less efficient, but more scalable, because you can double the number of reps and they produce twice as much ARR.
How do you I guess I'm sorry, I want to be mindful of the time, but also I want to just finish up with one real question, and then we'll jump into the
Sure.
run. For the people, for the marketing funnel, how do people even discover these tools? Besides, if I know Eric knows 70 startups, and then Eric could tell me what to use. What's a normal CTO or normal engineers kind of ways to figure out there is a tool that's for that solution kind of thing?
Yeah, so there's I think there's quite a bit of word of mouth happening within engineering teams, and that takes kind of non-traditional forms. I don't think they're talking over lunch as much as Hacker News and other kind of forums where people every day are running into issues. Like, I'm building an AI app, and I need a database. They go to the internet and they start asking what's the best vector database? And then they run into these articles and they run into content, or how do I build a RAG system? And it says, go find a vector database app. What's the best vector database? And so I think that's a very typical, as people are building, they're trying to bring pieces together. And as they're engaging with the internet, they're discovering different pieces and opportunities. And people are talking on these forums about what's the best tool, and that's and that's where I think open source shines, is that, hey, here's kind of a free tool, I'm going to add it to my system, and then I'm going to talk on Slack with the founders, figure out how it works, and then they're going to discover I'm actually from a big company and this is a really big problem, and they're going to help me see that they have an even bigger product I didn't know about to solve that problem. So I think that's generally the motion, is engineers putting together a solution, engaging with all the content on the internet to figure out how to do that, and stumble into these products kind of through word of mouth forums.
I feel now there will be maybe someone on someone's marketing team, there will be someone just hack into how to let Perplexity or the ChatGPT of the world to spin off answer of your company. Maybe that's
yeah.
problem, but okay, so we'll save that for later. But I have a quick 1-minute fire round for you. What's your favorite book?
Ender's Game when I was a kid. Yeah.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Probably one of my partners, Ariel Seidlin.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
David Brooks, New York Times columnist.
Where can we find you outside of work?
This weekend I was hiking in a river valley outside Monterey, but probably at a kid's soccer game.
Amazing. Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Grace. That's fun.
Let me quickly end stream.